everyone. So I have the distinct pleasure of being able to moderate the upcoming panel, which Dr. Robb Kelly will be joining us, as well as Norma Nicholson and Sharon, Mayne, Devine. So we're going to use Dr. Kelly's keynote address as a jumping off point to launch us into this next panel. And Dr. Kelly, you said something that really stuck out for me, and that was, you said many things, I should qualify, but one in particular that I took note of, and you said education of family is vital. And I couldn't agree more with you. And in fact, that's sort of the segue into this next panel. And in this panel, we're going to explore the family unit as a complex social system in which members interact to influence each other's behaviors and the patterns that emerge around addiction and criminalized behavior. Other factors such as experiences of racism, marginalization, as well as biological and psychosocial conditions will be highlighted as they influence criminal behavior among young people. And who better to speak about these things than my esteemed colleagues, Sharon, Mayne, Devine, and Norma Nicholson. So I'm going to just quickly go through their bios, and then I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to let Sharon do her piece. Norma will follow up with her presentation, and Dr. Kelly, you'll have an opportunity to add a few more comments, as I suspect you'll have some. And then we're going to open up the floor to some question and answer period. So Sharon Mayne Devine is the CEO of Catholic Family Services of Peel and the Davis Center for Families, which is a multi-service center located in Peel. Sharon is committed to community collaboration and passionate about finding innovative solutions to address intractable societal issues. Prior to becoming the CEO, Sharon taught at the University of Guelph in the Department of Family Relations and Applied Nutrition, holding several positions, including assistant professor, sessional instructor, and special graduate faculty. Sharon is a clinical member and approved supervisor of the American Association of Marriage and Family Therapy, as well as a registered social worker. She's worked as an individual, couple, and family therapist since 1990. Her professional experience and academic interests include transformational leadership, which I have witnessed, addressing issues of violence and trauma in the lives of women and children, pedagogical practices that facilitate transformational learning, and narrative approaches to exploring experiences of marginalization, discrimination, and trauma. We're also joined by Norma Nicholson, who's an amazing woman. I've had the pleasure of getting to know Norma throughout the course of this conference planning, and I'm so excited to introduce her as well. So Norma is a 4-time published author, speaker, and educator, mental health advocate for at-risk youth and families. She's also a retired registered nurse, a leader, a mentor, and she served 30 years of public service motivating and mentoring families and youth to transform their mindset to see the world positively. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sharon and let her share her words of wisdom with us. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It's a privilege to be a part of this panel today. And Dr. Robb, just really appreciated your opening keynote and found myself taking notes as you were talking. So I thought what I would do this morning, because this is a panel, is I would just share a few thoughts and reflections. I thought, okay, what can I say that might be meaningful in 10 or 15 minutes to kick off our reflections. So as I thought about what I could say, it would sum up the core, the heart of how I think when engaging clients, also when I engage in working with larger systems. The word that came to me is the word Ubuntu. Ubuntu. I am because we are. This is a word that was really brought into my awareness and I think into our Western consciousness through the work of Nelson Mandela, who's an inspirational leader. And when I think about change and inspiration and transformation, I think about the work of this man and the work of so many of my colleagues and the people I work with who have direct experiences of marginalization and discrimination. And I think that for me, that's probably the central lens I'm constantly trying to hold in the way I think, and especially as a white woman, really humbly, sharing my understanding of this very rich term as I speak. And I think for me, always wanting to hold my own social location. And I think the more we can always be constantly and continually aware of the impacts of real life lived experience with everyone we encounter, I think is a critical value, I think, of mine. There's a beautiful definition of this word by, in the African Journal of Social Work. And it's really highlighting that every individual human being is part of a larger and more significant relational, communal, societal, environmental, and spiritual world. And I think in our Western ways of working, especially in a medicalized focus, we're focusing on that individual. And it's a bit of a paradox because, of course, we have to focus on individuals, but we also have to focus on their larger relational frame continually. So, it's holding, I think, multiple lenses, multiple perspectives, and sometimes it's like juggling several, balls or holding several lenses at the same time. And when I think about what's really important today, as we're working and engaging, not just with the individuals we're working with, but also engaging the systems we're interacting with, because we do need to change the systems to be more effective in the ways that we're going to work with individuals. So as Mary said, I'm a family therapist, and I've had the privilege of also being an educator and now a leader in the community. And this opportunity to speak with you today has kind of brought me back to what are my bedrock ideas or concepts, So the first one certainly is this idea that I am because we are. So the family as an interacting part where the individuals are always standing in relationship with one another. So in family systems theory, we're very fond of saying that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. I think all of us who are a part of relational systems, and that's the term I'm going to use as I go forward, rather than talking about family systems, I'm going to talk about relationship systems, because the family someone may experience may not be their biological family, may be a group of, people who cohabitate in a group home, or, in a prison system, or in a gang, or in a classroom, or whatever cluster of people we're spending our time with is our relationship system. And I think all of us have probably had that experience. I don't know about you, but I have, where I'm determined that I'm going to be different when I visit my family, at Thanksgiving. And I'm not going to maybe engage in that behavior or sound a particular way. And yet as soon as I walk into that family, I'm right back into the old way or the old dance. I don't know if other people have had that experience, but it took years and years to begin to shift some ways that I interacted with my siblings. And it took effort, because those system dances are powerful. And I would argue that we could take Dr. Robb's idea of the neural pathways, and I think we have the same kind of strings and dynamics and dances that happen across our relationship patterns, that despite our very best efforts, we can fall into. So that's a real dominant idea that I hold when I'm working with people. I can have the best intentions that I'm going to be different when I walk into that room, and then find that I'm not. And it takes such effort to change those patterns. And if we're all determined to change the patterns, it's a little bit easier than when I'm only one person trying to change a pattern or dance. The other idea I'm always holding is an adult attachment lens. We are hardwired for attachment. We want to love and be loved. We have to be in relationship with one another. And when we're not, that's when despair happens. And I think, we have all probably studied early childhood attachment, and we know that babies don't thrive when they're not in a relationship. Well, adults don't thrive either. So that's why people continually go back to relationships that might be challenging, not good for them. So that's another idea I'm always holding. And of course, all of this is sitting inside a larger relationship system. And we're having experiences related to all those social determinants of health that we talk about, and certainly poverty, racism, other experiences of marginalization are things that the individual and the family is knocking up against or coming up against. Now, the other idea that I'm always holding, my entire career has been working in the area of trauma. So, I know at our agency at Catholic Family Services and at the Honorable William G. Davis Center for Families, we have the Safe Center of Peel. And this is where we're working with individuals, families that are experiencing family and interpersonal trauma. So when I'm holding all of these lenses, I'm also holding my awareness and knowledge of the impacts of trauma on the lives of the people that we're working with. And that trauma may be interpersonal in nature, happening between parents and kids, across kids, between parents. But there's also the trauma of racism, the trauma of immigration, the trauma of the kinds of experiences kids may have in the schoolyard, the trauma of living in poverty, the trauma of not having any hope or possibility. And so trauma is impacting, of course, our brain, as Dr. Robb talked about in terms of those neural pathways, but it's also creating the conditions for the family that make it very difficult for them to be that place of security and safety for an individual, coming up. So I think those are a lot of pieces. I'm just kind of sharing with you all these pieces that I'm, holding on to when I'm working with an individual or when we're working with families. As I was saying a little bit earlier, if I go back to this idea of those relationship, the family systems, the relationship dynamics, they are as strong and entrenched as the neural pathways in our brain. And I often think, gee, if we could do an MRI of a family relationship, we could actually see the pathways that occur, the dance that occur between families. And in a sense, as family therapists, that's what we do. It's like we're watching these patterns play out and seeing what might be happening between people that leads to conflict, frustration, a sense of not being loved, cared about. And sometimes a lot of it is driven by people's own experiences of trauma individually brought into the family from outside, as well as fear. Working with families the way I have for so many years, people get scared. And they get scared of losing one another. They get scared of change. They get scared of the addiction. They get scared of what might happen. And when people are afraid, they're no longer able to respond in ways that can bring healing in their relationships. So part of, I think, the work that we do when we think about families is, yes, education, but it's also really working at the emotional systems level with the family as well, to really help people connect to what those bedrock feelings are that they may be struggling with, in their relationships with one another. I'm a big fan and advocate of working with individuals within the family system wherever possible. It takes time and the expertise of a therapist or someone who's adept at working in family systems to help a family choreograph that dance to create those new pathways in relationships. Having said that, though, is also the awareness and knowledge that it is not always safe to do so. So part of what we do at the Safe Center, for example, is we oftentimes have to work with the individual parts before we can bring the family together, because we have to be paying attention to things like safety planning, risk assessments, and the pathway to freedom really is radical personal responsibility. So I know it's a bit of a paradox, because on the one hand, I'm saying we have to work with the whole and choreograph the dynamics and shift the patterns of interaction in the family on the one hand. But on the other hand, each individual has to make that individual commitment to being radically responsible for their own individual feelings, reactions, in order to shift and change them. So we're holding this tension between the I, the me, and the we in that relationship dynamic. And I think helpers, and for those of you who may be working on an individual basis, may not have access, certainly our courts are very individual focused. I think holding the knowledge that there's a bigger frame, that there is a bigger force in that person's life that they're up against, as well as we're up against. And I think can explain some of the difficulties that people have in making the changes that they make. And I know for us, working in the area of violence in relationships, it's effortful, takes time. And I think our job is to hold the hope and the belief in the possibility that change is possible. And that, when we talk about I am, because we are, sometimes as the helper, the relationship space or frame that we create with that individual may be the safest relationship they have in their lives at any given moment. And that becomes the place where people begin to practice how it is that they can begin to relate differently in the world. And our role is to always hold compassion at the same time as we're holding the person accountable and inviting them into that radical accountability that is the path of freedom in their lives, and always to be treating everyone with the utmost dignity and respect and care, despite the fact that they may have and will continue to do things that may actually harm their very self-interest. We don't just work with victims at Catholic Family Services, we work with perpetrators too. I don't know that I've ever met a perpetrator of violence that hasn't themselves had some experience of trauma in their lives. And so we have to hold compassionate accountability and hold these multiple perspectives to help people and families and relationships systems make the changes that they long to make. So that's my wisdom. 15 minutes of years, but I tried to distill it into 15 minutes, and I'm hoping there's lots of questions when we get to the question panel, and I hope that was helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sharon. I could listen to you for hours. You've got such breadth of knowledge, and the way that you're able to share with us, you've simplified some very, very complex systems. And so I really do appreciate your ability to do that. So with that, I'm going to move on. Norma, would you like me to open up your presentation?
I was just unmuting, so thank you.
Yes, okay.
Thank
I'll
you
work.
so much for this opportunity today to speak to quite a large group of folks. I see we have many participants. And Dr. Robb Kelly, thank you for being our keynote speaker today. As Mary mentioned, our focus today is the family unit as a complex system. And I think as leaders, we have incredible opportunity to change someone's life every day, especially if those individuals are seeking the change. So my next slide, we will look at how do we change? How do we break the cycle? How do we break the silence? In this past summer, you went far ahead, Mary. Past summer, I participated in what's called an educational institute for teachers. One of the individual organization that spoke and really brought to my attention that we must bring awareness and advocate for young people who have precarious immigration status. So I'll step back a bit and say I collaborated with a group of individuals in Ontario, the youth justice system also, and built healthcare for our youth that were incarcerated. They still are, but the numbers have decreased. I manage a cross-section of professionals to provide healthcare for youth. And as mentioned before, some had terrible addictions. Remember, these are youth. They're children, I call them, between the age of 12 and 17. Some were addicted even when they were 8 or 9 years old from what was happening in their family. Some were just diagnosed. I would say it's not measured here, but some were diagnosed with having a mental illness only when they entered the youth justice system. And from those experiences, I decided when I retire that I would like to write a book about my life and use it as a tool to help others, families, and their children. So that's how it led up to the Summer Institute that I attended, where I took away from that I must be a part of this change. So as we go to the next slide, we talk about childhood arrival support and advocacy, CASA, C-A-S-A. CASA is a part of the JFCY, which is the Justice for Children and Youth Legal Clinic here in Ontario. And Dr. Kelly would see this as the Dreamers in the United States. So in Canada, and I'll focus just on Ontario today because most of the other provinces do not admit these children to school at all. So in Ontario, who are these children? Who are these children that have precarious immigration status? They came to Canada when they were 5 or 6 years of age. They came with their parents who perhaps came on a vacation, or maybe they came thinking that once they're here in the country, they could apply to get their immigration status. Of course, these children, they do not have any documents, so they were never told. They live with their parents. They have no idea that their parents or guardian do not have immigration status. They go to work. And as we know, when folks go to work and they don't have immigration status, even as refugees, they work what we call underground, pay no tax, not known, hiding away. So these children have no knowledge of what is happening. Most of them find out when they start attending school. So where are they? In many homes, some of them may be teenagers now that are lost. They have gone through so much. They are maybe some of the kids that are engaged in violence in our schools. We do not know, because even some of the teachers in the school do not know about these children. So what challenges do they face? Other than being unaware of their status, they do not even know, and the parents do not know, that they have a right to attend school. All children from the age of 5 to 17, the United Nations Convention says they are human beings, they have human rights, and they must attend school. The right of children, anyone under the age of 18 years of age, and we know that there's some young people, they can even go to college and university when they're 17. They're very smart ones, can even go at 16. But the law is covering them from the age of 5, 17 or 18, that they must be in school. Do any of you know where these children are? Have you ever met any of them? So what does CASA do? Next slide, please. CASA is a part of the Justice for Children and Youth Legal Clinics. They are embedded in that or in the government service so that they can reach out and help these children and their families. So CASA does outreach work. They provide legal representation. When I get to the resources, I will give more in-depth information on how legal representation may be presented. CASA are trusted intermediary supporters. They provide workshops and they provide other resources free of cost. Next slide. So we talk about families and the overlapping issues. Just imagine for a moment that you came to Canada from any country around the world when you were 5 or 6 years old. You do not know anything about the country from which your parents brought you. You're here in Canada and it's time to go to school. You're all excited, only to be told by some schools that you're not allowed to enter because you do not have immigration status. What is going to happen? Parents do not want to be found out. Children may need to stay at home. Lack of financial resources. Where do you get money when perhaps your parents, they're not able to keep jobs or they cannot even work? Now you have gone through the public school, if you have been fortunate to be admitted to one of these schools that accept children without immigration status. You've traveled through the school system. Just think of a young person who is about 9 or 10 years old in school, and the guidance counselor says, "You are doing so well in school. You are getting A's. I want you and your parents to start doing some planning. As you get into the other grades, maybe you can go to university." Maybe you can go to college and you get all excited about that, only to find out later when you get into high school, that's not an opening for you, and I'll explain why. You are at school, you fall and you break your knee or your ankle, you were running and playing, and the teacher calls, or the principal, someone calls your parent. Your mother does not go to the school, or your father, because they are afraid that someone will inform the justice system or the immigration system that you have no landing status. Luckily, there are some walk-in clinics that will provide care for these families, but they will not have a family doctor. As they get older and they're so marginalized, some may end up with mental health issues. Normally, and I say normally in quotation marks, here in Ontario, we are waiting, many individuals are waiting 2 to 3 years to see a psychiatrist or a psychologist, especially since we've gone through COVID and there's no such help. So when a young person with precarious immigration status cannot even ask the question of where I will get help, you can only imagine if you get no help at all with managing your mental health, it only worsens. Think of employment. I can say when I was 16, 15, even at age 14 in the summertime, I worked and I saved this because I was planning to go to university. Not one of these children is able to access summer jobs. So they become socially isolated. They become very fearful. They are traumatized. And both Sharon and Dr. Kelly has talked about the impact of trauma on folks, which in children often leads to many forms of challenging behaviors. You cannot then, as a teacher or a principal, call the parents together to discuss at a parent-teachers meeting your child, this child that is presenting challenging behaviors. So what often happens is they just drop out of school because there's no connection between family, between the school, and between those children. I want to get this really opened in your mind because normally our children go to school, their parent-teachers meeting, they're the days when it's the first day of school. Kids are all excited. Parents sometimes go with them to meet the teacher. They're in new classroom, having friends, but they do not share much with those friends. And then they may become so quiet, they could even be bullied. We have no data that I can find of any research that has been done to say where these children are now. And I'm thinking of those that came at age 5 or 6, and they are now 14 or 15 years old. Where are they? As I mentioned at the beginning, they could be in the care of the Children's Aid. They could be walking the streets. They could be seeking shelter in the youth shelter system. Here in the region of Peel, Brampton, and Mississauga, we have 2 youth shelters that are filled all the time. Could there be some of those children there who are having so much difficulties? Where are they? So I want to then look at the resources that we can provide for these families if we come across them. Please do not call the immigration. These kids cannot be sent back to homes where they have no knowledge. They do not even know when they were born in those countries. Canada has been their homes. Luckily, in most of the schools, there are settlement workers, and these settlement workers are awesome. So if you come across a child or a family that says, I don't know what to do, I'm so afraid that if the authorities find out about us being here, we're going to be sent back home. And I don't even mind going home, but what is going to happen to my child or my children who have never lived in that country? So if you're ever talking to anyone, just say there are settlement workers in every school in Ontario, unless that was changed recently. There's what's called legal aid, and you can find all these on Google or your internet. Legal Aid Ontario will certainly help find lawyers that you do not have to pay to direct you on how you can access support through humanitarian means. The Law Society, when you phone them, you can have even a free 30-minute consultation. They do not say, where do you live? Why are you doing this? You just want some help for your children to access education while you're trying to figure out your life. And not only will they help them to access education, they will provide further services through immigration that may eventually lead to your children remaining here. And then as parents, you need to work also within that jurisdiction to find out how you can manage your own life. There's Pro Bono in Ontario, where you can get free legal advice by phone. There's also a healthcare inquiry on the webpage that will say these are the places you can go to get healthcare if you have no Ontario health card. They would not have a SIN number, social insurance number. They do not have a HOHIP number. They may not have any kind of insurance to cover any kind of illness or treatment that is required. Let's look at how can we advocate for these children. I take myself right back to when I was managing healthcare at the Roy McMurtry Youth Center. And I've often heard individuals say, why are these kids here? They come from good homes. Why are they in jail? They are of certain religion that teaches them not to do anything wrong. So why are they here? And when the psychiatrist or the psychologist explores their life individually, they are coming from a traumatic background that was never addressed. So I want to insert, before I talk about the educators, when you have your teenager at home And that teenagers used to go to school, get very good grades, wake up in the morning, surprise mom or dad at breakfast. And then in a few weeks, you notice that teenager saying, Mom, I don't feel like going to school today. And the part that may be really hard for these young people is if mom or dad responds, you're getting very lazy, get up and go to school. That's not laziness if there are other factors contributing to this young person not wanting to go to school, but would rather go and walk around the mall. Because you as a parent have not had any relationship because of the things you're doing that impedes the life of your children, you really don't know in depth what is happening. So some of our teachers or educators and administrators of our school are sometimes aware that these children exist. They don't have any immigration status, and they will welcome them in their schools without asking any questions because they have a right to education, and they should not be the ones that are, I would say, pay for what parents would like to achieve. Students themselves and parents may not know about school access. They've been talking to other individuals who don't know that, and they will say, well, you can't tell anyone. You can't go to school. You must stay home. So many may be quite illiterate. Many may be getting into substance abuse. Others, as I say, may be homeless. So how can you advocate for these children? You can actually find out what school boards in your community welcome all children, whether they're refugee children, whether they're children without immigration status, whether they're newcomers, whether they're waiting to get their documentation. All school boards should welcome all children into schools. And we do not, I talk about myself, because there may be lawyers listening, I do not have the knowledge to say to an administrator in a school, this is the reason why you must accommodate this child. I would not go and talk about their immigration status. I would just say, child needs to be in school. Tell people without status about their children's right to education and share known resources. I talked about CASA. CLEO is another advocate, Community Legal Education in Ontario. Those organizations, they have the tools, they have the resources. Pick up the phone and call. If you do not have much information about the family, except that their children are not in school, share that. And if it's okay by the family, you can connect them together. In that way, you're helping children get registered for school. Sometimes as an advocate, you could even make a phone call to the school on behalf of the parents. I have done that. And the way I did that was in my church, I met a family and they shared that they had no home. They are so afraid of being sent back to their country, and the children are very fearful. And then my only question was, can you share with me why John is not in school? And parent responded, "We have no papers." And without papers, meaning immigration papers, what I did was I called the settlement worker at the school, public school that was near to the area where those folks were staying in the shelter. They were connected, and I imagine, because I do not want to know about their immigration follow-up because I can't counsel anyone. I made the connection, and I know that those children are now attending school. So we can advocate for these children. You may think, and I could hear some people saying, well, why did they come to Canada when they're not landed? That's to be sorted out by the adults. I am advocating on behalf of children because I have seen so many young people get incarcerated because they were lost. They had mental illnesses. They had no parental support. They got into gangs. And unless you invest in someone's life, each day, each of us strive to invest even in one life. We need to use school as platform for success for our children. Next slide, please. And I just want to thank Childhood Arrival Support Advocacy, CASA, for having that institute during the summer. And they don't have any stats either of what happens to these children. They're just working on their stats. Community legal education and advocates. What can you do today to make a difference in the lives of children that are marginalized? Children that have no hopes and dreams unless someone intercedes. Looking at our future generation, where will they be? I thank you.
Norma, thank you so much. You have certainly raised some thought-provoking issues that you know, are arguably hidden or are not well known, and definitely not necessarily considered when we're starting to see people, children, emerging adults in our justice system, or when we're dealing with the presentation of behaviors. We really do need to consider all of the things that you've spoken about today, and also what Sharon has spoken about. It's critical to do so. So with that, I'm going to invite Dr. Kelly to see if he's got a few more words that he might want to add at this point.
Hi, Mary.
Hi again.
Excellent presentations, guys. Thank you so much. I'm also taking notes as well, Sharon, as you both speak, and Norma. I was busy. That's why I turned my camera. Busy writing notes. Excellent. Anything you'd like me to comment on or talk about?
And perhaps at this time, I'll remind the audience that we have a Q&A button, and please, you're welcome to post your questions there that I can read to our panelists. And I see that they're, okay, I'm not seeing any questions yet. Perhaps I can pose a question while we wait for others to come in. So as community members, how, and this is to each of you, each panelist, how would you, encourage us or direct us to effectively address issues that we might be observing in families in our community? Are there any words of wisdom or advice that you could give to sort of the general community?
Well, I'll answer. One part of that is building relationship and not judging anyone from the way they present. I get the opportunity to speak to young people who are learning about policing. And one of the questions I often ask those groups is, should you see a 15-year-old walking north on the street, his pants is below his waist, his shirt is all ruffled, his hair has not been combed, his shoe is falling off. What are you thinking about that young person? And these are young people also, and I pose this question to adults, and what they will say is, they are good for nothing. They are losers. They don't know what they want to do with their life. And what I will respond and say, tell me how you were able to just look at someone and be able to tell about that person's life. So it's a matter of building relationship, because that young man, he could be coming from a home of poverty. He could be living in a home where there is addiction. He could be living in a home where parents or grandparents have dementia. He could have woken up late, had to get his siblings to school, and therefore just thought, why do I even bother? So we have to be very careful as community not to judge someone from the way we are seeing that person. Build relationship first.
Thank you.
I like that. And what I can add as well is that from my own experience, I never set out to be homeless. I never set out to be an alcoholic. You know, these things happen to us. Again, the studies we've done, we're about 5 paychecks away from homeless usually, when mom and dad are working, you know, in jobs that don't pay 6 figures. So I always try and put myself in other people's shoes when I come across something like this, because, you know, it could quite easily be me, it could quite easily be you. Dialogue, understanding, education, all plays into this. Even when you see someone like, can you help? You know, can you walk over to them? Well, in today's world, I'm not too sure. Can you get them help? 100%. You know, so it's all, I think the more people that do this, the more people that observe from outside the family has to gently persuade or educate part of that family, even the person we're talking about. Like I said, the choice wasn't mine. I grew up in the projects, which is council estates, not too sure what is in Canada, but breadline kind of family where there wasn't much money, but there was lots of love in the house. But, you know, we couldn't go on vacations. We couldn't afford that stuff. You know, even weekend vacations with the school that cost about 10 pence or something. My mum and dad couldn't afford to pay that. So what we can make ourselves after that is very important. But who thinks of that child when you see them? Could that child be another me, another you? I mean, there's nothing better to me when a family, our office is we had to get a second office, put the cards in for the thank yous, because you never know what a difference another human being can make without you knowing. And here's the thing that I love is when I'm in a meeting or, you know, someone sees me on television or something, they recognize me in the street and they say something like this. Hi, Dr. Robb, do you remember me? Of course I don't. I'm old. I don't have a good memory. Oh, yes. Awesome. Yeah, 25 years ago, you saw me homeless and you took me to my first treatment center and introduced me to the housing system. And now I have a job, 2 children. It's like, if I was busy that day, if I was full of me, you know, with my problems, I don't have any problems, but I can make my brain huge. What would have happened to that person? And I think people are putting your path every single day for you to help. Are we busy in our phone? Are we busy with problems that don't really exist? Are we worried about a text we might get, a like we might get, you know, with our heads buried in the phone and walking past these people? Because once we open our eyes, we can see everything that God, universe, Uncle Jimmy up there, whichever, has placed before us. But are you ready? Are you open-minded? And are you looking? Because when we get to that position with the knock-on effect, we end up helping millions and millions of people. And that's what I like, and that would be the advice for me.
Thank you. Sharon, do you want to chime in?
Oh my gosh, I don't know how I can even add to what both Norma, and Dr. Robb have said here. I think I just want to punctuate what Norma said about, really both of them about building those relationships. And I think building them with humility, right? We don't know fully what people are up against. And I think that walking into that relationship, starting with, for that person, I am not safe, not yet, so there's got to be, especially I think in the situations that Norma's talking with us about, can we even, any of us, imagine what it's like to be so precarious in a country, the kind of concealing that has to happen, the secrecy that has to happen, the utter and complete lack of safety? How does that person even begin to trust? So I think the way to do that is through kindness, care, and compassion. And sometimes what we have to do is be that advocate on people's behalf. So we have to focus not just on, the individual treatment, get out of that individual thinking box and think about, okay, how can I advocate on this person's behalf? How can I help them navigate the system? How can I do that warm handoff? We have to not just write a phone number down, hand it to someone and say, here, you can go to this food bank. No, it's like, okay, I'm going to get somebody on the phone right now from the food bank, and I'm going to have a chat with them with you in the room with me. And let's have a conversation together with them. Or maybe, one of the things we do at the Safe Center is we all live together in the same place. So I can walk down the hall around the doorway into another suite to say, here's some folks who can help you deal with this. We have to pay attention to the systems navigation piece and our responsibility to help people, not for them to navigate, we have to navigate. And when I do that, then I'm building that trust with that person, and always with kindness. I think it's just, and I'm probably stating the obvious, and we all probably all know that. But I think sometimes we have to challenge the constraints of the boxes the systems put us in as professionals to reach out. And I think that's what I'm hearing Dr. Robb talk about, right?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, nobody in a crisis situation is going to help themselves. Well, if you go here and do this, they're not going to do it. That you're not made a change. What you've done is pass the buck back to the person that has the problem. So, the idea is to get them into a place to make that phone call, like you said, and get them help right there and then. What's it going to do? 20 minutes out of your life to save a life? Because many people don't think they're saving lives. They go, oh, I'm not that powerful. I didn't really do it much. What you do, as little or as big as it may be, has an effect on another human being, period. Yeah. And that effect, if it's successful, will stay with them for the rest of their lives. And I don't know who's paid back up there, but you will be paid back. Believe me, you will. We're in the business of putting families back together. We're not an addiction company. We put families back together, but it's important that you do it now. So again, if you want to do something for somebody, there's a 7.3 second rule. Do it now and don't wait, because I've done it a couple of times and learned by mistake. I've seen someone in crisis. It's, oh, well, I'm busy now, blah, 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 on Facebook because somebody sent me a funny picture. And then by the time I got back, the guy had gone, and I learned 2 days later that he'd hung himself. Now then, could I have made a difference? Who knows? I don't run the world, but my conscience would have been a lot better if I didn't have my head back in the phone. And that was a huge, powerful lesson for me. And it's backed by a couple of million people who have benefited from my little words or action. So I think, yeah, action from everybody out there to these crisis people is vital, absolutely vital, because we all have a part to play. Again, we're 3 paychecks away from being in trouble ourselves. So why wouldn't you do that? Awesome. Thank you. Awesome answer.
And Mary, if I can just, I know we don't have very much time left, but I just want to just say one thing that really none of us has really touched on directly, and that is we have to remember ourselves as individuals so embedded in our own family and social systems. I know I'm using a lot of jargon there, but I mean, we're up against hard work in the work that we're doing when we're working with people in the justice system, people who are struggling with addictions, precarious employment, precarious housing status. So the importance of having colleagues to support us and to be doing the work collectively, I cannot punctuate enough the importance of that. Because it's tough work, and as Dr. Robb's talking about, going above and beyond, we need to make sure that we stay fed ourselves. Like we count too as helpers in this role, and I think if I've learned anything through the pandemic is the importance. I am because we are. Not just the individuals I'm working about, but me and you and each other. So having those professional networks of people who care and we're kind to one another, I think is a critical piece of how we can show up in care and kindness for our clients. Because if I'm not supported, how in the world am I going to be able to do the work that I'm doing with the people who come to me?
Powerful, very powerful. The airplane, I would say the airplane syndrome, when the mask drops from the ceiling. Do they ask you to put it on the baby first, or no, you look after yourself, get it on you first. You're prepared and educated enough to then, with experience, tend to somebody else who's in trouble. But if we don't look after ourselves, then it's so easy to do. I was taken back into hospital 9 years ago with a breakdown for traumatic events that happened to a child that I didn't deal with. But I was saving lives, and I was seeing 40 patients a day, but what about me? So it's really important that who's caring for the carer? Mm-hmm. Because most people think we've got our stuff together. Most people think we're good. I can tell you this from experience of the 8,000 something patients I've worked with, that every single person that I worked with takes a piece of me away from me. And if I don't replace that piece from me, I'm going to burn out. And if I burn out, how many people are going to die because I didn't take care of me? Wow, that was powerful. I got chills myself then.
Well, we still have a little bit more time. What if I could sum up some of the things that I was hearing? Really, it's that compassion for self, for others, seeing others, really seeing others, eyes wide open, respecting people, not judging people, extending care and kindness. And all of those things are free. And so I know that we have constraints, we have limitations with funding, but human decency is free. Treating people with respect is free. So I think that we really need to hang on to that and remember that, because that's quite powerful. And it makes a difference, and it changes lives. And I'll go so far as to say as it saves lives when we see people as people. I'm going to circle back to Norma for a second. Norma, do you mind if you could speak a little bit more expansively about some of the supports that you see that the children that you were speaking about, some of those supports that you would see as valuable?
I think identifying is one of the first things. Like if a teacher doesn't know or have no idea that a child, say 15 or 16, has precarious immigration status, that teacher will be encouraging that child, go to university, go to college. But in Ontario, none of those kids can go any further than high school. They can't go to college or university unless they have money to pay as a foreign student in the country. So I think it's identifying in a very subtle way, and as we've been talking about, is reaching out to help, and not reaching out and saying you need to go back to your country or you need not to be here. But putting yourself in that person's shoe and saying, what would I like help with? How would I like to be held?
Thank you, Norma. In the comments, somebody had indicated that it can be quite frustrating when you go the extra mile, but systems put barriers in the way and they're not willing to go the extra mile. Any advice around that?
It's all about change. It's all about being bordering on aggressive. Bordering on, you know, the more times we do this, the more times they're going to look. Someone's going to look and go, what's going wrong here? I mean, I get excited about, you know, situations where the government go, oh, I'm not too sure. Yes, things need to change. Am I going to be that person, that pain in the backside that keeps turning up when a no is waiting for me? Am I going to keep doing that every single day until they change? Yes, I am. You know, and my voice, my encouragement to the person that needs help, that matters the most. And I think, and this has happened to me in a lot of times when them no's come up and you see another human being and you're adamant that this must happen with all your heart, people see into that. People see that you're not going to let this go, that this is the right thing to do. You'd be surprised how many tough guys, you know, law guys, they've got a huge heart, but they've got to put this tough exterior on. It's very frustrating, Norma, you know, very, very frustrating. But you have to ask yourself this: why has somebody chosen you to do this? Why have you chosen you to do this? And the simple answer is this: you were meant, Irma, to change the world, to change the system, to change people. These people will always make an excuse, but we don't stand for it. We keep going and going and going. And I think that's the only way. And we care and we place and, you know, we do anything within our, because that might be your thing for the day. You know, you do all this and they won't go the extra mile. Well, why don't we go 2 miles? Why don't we go 2 miles? Our mile and their mile. Does always make a difference. And I think, and the other thing I want to say as well is for us that are in this situation where we're trying to get people well and help is, and I'm huge on this, nobody says to the caregivers, great job, or you're doing really good. There was an instance in my office in Dallas that, you know, the guy walked in, he was suicidal, he walked out, he was smiling, hugging everyone. One nurse said to the other, God, did you just see what Dr. Robb did? He's amazing. And the other nurse says, I know. Have you told him that? And he, oh, no. I mean, he already knows. We don't know. That's all I'm saying about that. Nobody knows. So it gives me more confidence that I'm doing the right thing because other people around me are supporting me and telling me I am. And I don't know about you, Irma, but I ain't going anywhere. I ain't going anywhere real soon. So make that change. And thank you awesomely for what you do, Irma. And you know, it's an amazing job. It can get lonely sometimes, but you stick in there. I'm telling you, it'll all be worth it.
Maybe I can add a piece to this, and I think looking for colleagues who are like-minded. The changes that I've been a part of that we've been able to make have been changes that we've engaged in collective action around. So having allies inside and outside the workplace can be powerful as well. Because it's one thing to be an individual who brings something to the attention of, whether that be a supervisor, a manager, a leader of an organization. If we're talking about legal changes, policy changes, collective action, I think is the way to go. Because I even know myself as an employer, if I have one staff to bring something to me, but if I have 5 staff who bring something for me, I'm going to listen a little bit differently than if it's just one. And being tenacious with it. You might have to say it once, twice, 6 times, 8 times, 24 times, and build evidence, make a case over time. So those are just a few tips I've learned. People listen to me when I'm speaking in chorus with many other people.
One thing I'd love to add real quick is Satpreet, thank you. That's awesome. Collective action is key. Solidarity in numbers. I like that.
Yep.
Solidarity in numbers.
Yep.
And I know you do great jobs over there, guys. And you know, if you need any help from me, I'm going to put my cell phone number in the chat here. So you not only got help from the Canada, the country that you love, but you've got somebody in the USA backing you as well. And if I can do anything, chat to anybody, you know, give you a 5-minute pep talk, whatever it is, it's open to all 63 people on here. So I just wanted to say that. Thanks, Mary.
Thank you for that offer. Norma, do you want an opportunity to remark?
Yes, why? I love taking opportunities. My goodness, this has been such an interesting panel. I hear families, I hear relationship, I hear compassion. I was a nurse for 46 years, and I just reflect on the times that I just sat and listened, and that was all that person needed. I reflect on the time where I worked in youth custody, and I would see young people that were thrown in isolation for whatever behaviors. And I would say, may I go and talk to John? And I would ask permission to go into that isolation room. And I would say, John, I'm here for you. My name is Norma. Do you want to talk? And that person would sit up and say, Miss, you are the first person that ever said that. All I have been hearing is you're bad, you're terrible. But I tell you, if one person can make a difference in somebody's life, my teacher, Miss Livingston, when I went to public school, and my Nana, Alice Francis, said, you were born for a purpose. Because those of you who do not know, I was abandoned as a 6-month-old, never expected to survive, should not be alive today. And that is how I give back. I want to see every one of us taking time out of our day or night or evening just to give back. Pay forward. Thank
Go
you.
ahead, Sharon.
This is such a, I think, a rich, conversation, and I probably there's a lot of wisdom even sitting in the room here among the 71 of us who are here. I think that there are, to go back to Irma's really, important comments there are moments where we can't do all the things that we want or are able to do. There are real moments where we come up against a limitation. And I don't want to, skirt that part of it either. I think that, in those kinds of situations, just coming clean with that, I think makes a difference. I think bearing witness to the suffering our systems cause people is also an important moment to take with people. And to just enter into that space with an individual, and to really bear witness to the painfulness of that for them, but also the painfulness of that for ourselves as well. I mean, when we talk about the justice system, it's not a flexible system, right? There are limits. Just make orders. Very real things happen. There are things I cannot undo for you right here, right now. There may be other action I can take to move something forward, but that might take 2 months, 2 years, 20 years. But in that moment, bearing witness to the suffering that the system is creating for that individual, despite all of our efforts, makes a difference. And, Norma, when you talked about, taking that moment and sitting down and saying, do you want to talk? Just that care and kindness and bearing that witness, I have to believe it matters in that moment to that individual. Because again, going back to theoretical stuff I was saying, attachment relationships, we're hardwired to be in relationship. And showing up in relationship isn't just about the change, celebration. It's about the pain and the mud and the guck of what it's like in the moment to be in that kind of pain and despair. And, you know, as a trauma therapist myself, I will tell you, I have spent hours with people just sitting, you know, for that short period of time, that 1 hour, that 15 minutes, that whatever it is, to be with and really see what that person is experiencing. And I have to believe that's a transformative moment in that person's life that at some point will make a difference. And, you know, Norma, you're just speaking so beautifully of the humanity, you know, that it takes just to, you know, to be able to sit with that person. You couldn't change the conditions of their life, but wow, what does it mean to that person to have that few minutes that somebody met me in that moment? And we don't know when that moment is going to spark something at some point in people's lives down the road. And it's painful. It's painful. This is not easy work we've signed on for here.
I just want to mention too, like when young people are incarcerated, as we say, we don't have their background, and for healthcare, we don't inquire about why they stole, why they did this. What we want to find out is what kind of help do they need for better health. And that's the focus. I'm listening to you, Sharon, and I'm visualizing a hallway in the Roy McMurtry where there was a 17-year-old young man. He did not want to go to school. He did not say why. He just said, I'm not going to school. And I said to him, how about coming over to see the doctor one day? And he said, I am healthy. And I say, the doctor is just going to talk with you. When the doctor met with him, he could not see very well. He did not want anyone to know, because I'm a big guy. Why do I want to tell people I don't see? When his eyes were tested by the optometrist, when I allowed him to choose the style glasses that he wanted, he packed his books and he went to school, and every afternoon you could see him doing his homework. I felt so humble that I took that moment. See, you can just walk by and ignore some situations you're seeing, and you will never in your life know about every situation, but just that one. To this day, that young man served. He was in for 3 years. He had probation, and he's doing so well because he now sees his world. Thanks.
Thank you. And Sabina has made a comment. She said she'd like to acknowledge the fatigue and possibly the vicarious trauma that workers may feel when working with challenging situations. And she hopes that workers are finding the time to take good care of themselves. And I think we've gotten some words of wisdom from our panelists today about how we can do that. How do we take care so that we can care for others? We're getting close to the end of our session. So I want to give the panelists another opportunity. If there are any closing thoughts that you want to share with the group, please feel free to do so now.
I think for me, it's as simple as this for me. If we want to change the system, we do it one person at a time. That's all, you know, and don't for a second think that, again, I'm re-emphasizing, because it's the worst mistake that we use as caregivers, is don't think for a second that your small, whatever it is that we do, does not make a difference. It really does. I mean, you will never know. You can go the rest of your life without knowing that kind word. So there was a young guy in California, and he wanted to commit suicide. So he went to the Golden Gate Bridge and he threw himself off. And sure enough, he died. When the police got him out to find out where he lived, he went back to his apartment just to see if there was any suicide note or anything. When they got back to the apartment, they found a letter which was a suicide note, on the table. And it read perfectly like this, word for word. I am going to the Golden Gate Bridge to throw myself off and take my own life because I can't go on anymore. Unless somebody on the way says hello, hi, or how you doing, I will stop and turn back. Don't ever think that a hello or a good morning doesn't change people's lives, because it does. Thank you.
Sharon, Norma, any other closing thoughts?
Keep smiling, Sharon.
Beautiful.
Well, you know,
Yeah.
I am because we are, you know, we are always standing in relationship to one another. And we all get to be learners. It's okay to make mistakes, take every opportunity to grow and to allow ourselves space to be that. I know we didn't get into that, you know, talking here, but compassion for self and compassion for others, including that community and the learning community, taking time out like this, time out to think, to take that step back, to feed, you know, your mind in order to be that learner, I think is maybe just again that.
Thank you.
And whatever we learn, share it, share that knowledge. It doesn't make sense at all to us in the world to have all this wisdom and do not share it with others. Share it with your neighbor, share it with a friend, have a group together, volunteer to go out and speak. My daughter always says, Mom, why do you go out and speak? And you don't charge any money. They give you a little honorarium. And I say, that's not my purpose of going. My purpose of going is to impact others' lives. They say that they're ready to hear this. So I'm going to get in that space with them and hope that they're ready to take it all in, an opportunity to look at themselves and to see what parts do I need to change? Do I need to reconnect with my family? I do this at the shelter. I was at a high school one day speaking to a group of grade 12. They're just moving on to university. And one young lady got up in the back and she says, Norma, I know you. And I didn't remember her at all. And I said to her, could we talk later? She says, no. When I was in the shelter, you came over to talk to us about repairing our relationship with our parents. And I took that up through the counselor. She called my mom, and I'm at home now, and I'm going to school. One sentence impacted that life. And I never thought I would even see her again. So whatever we do in life, reach out and touch someone else. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, listen, thank you so much on behalf of the Association of Justice and Treatment Professionals and all of our participants. You've all spoken from your hearts, and your willingness to be so raw and to be so forthcoming is both a privilege and an honor for us. I have to tell you, I've experienced a wealth of emotions, a roller coaster of emotions throughout this panel. Actually, since the morning started, I felt hope and I felt sadness hearing about the suffering and the pain of the human experience. But I'm left feeling hopeful, and I'm left feeling inspired, and I believe that all of our participants are probably, you know, feeling the same emotions as me as well, and I feel like I'm ready to go back out there and, you know, fight the good fight, And I'm energized to do that. And I'm hopeful that everybody else is energized to do that. And it's those small gestures. That's my takeaway. It's the small gestures. Those are the things that I can do to affect change. So thank you so much for reminding of all of that. And I think this is a really beautiful way to open up our conference. It really sets the table, sets the tone for the sessions that are upcoming. I'm excited to talk with police representatives from across North America in our next session. They're going to really talk about collaboration and collective action. And I think that you will leave that session feeling inspired as well. So you are now moving into a break, which is a little bit longer because we're ending 5 minutes early here. So we will be reconvening at 11:45 and we'll have chiefs of police, police representatives joining us at that time. So thank you again, everybody. Thank you for your comments, for your questions. This has truly been an inspiring panel. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a privilege.